Well, good morning, Living Streams. My name is Alex Seekins. I'm joined by the one and only Dalton Davis.
Hello.
It's funny because you guys know Dalton, but you don't know him as much, but you know him.
I'm rarely on this side.
Yeah, rarely on this side.
Unless I'm tagged in for like a last minute, hey, you want to host a podcast with CJ and Renee on marriage? And I'm like, what is going on?
Sure, yeah, we'll do that, Usually hanging outside, hanging in the back and off camera. Does the same thing on Sunday mornings, usually hiding behind a camera or a drum cage or a computer. And yet you see him oftentimes on Sundays in the announcements.
Yeah, less stations these days. Since the shift over to creative director, I've been able to look at our services a little more overview wise, and I'll go in and check on Espanol. So I ran camera for Next Gen Takeover, and that was like, oh man, I'm a little rusty, but I still got it, Yeah, it was like I was at this, and I was always behind a camera or switching or something for so many years. You know, so.
And the secret, the not so secret is that Jeff Goki is the greatest challenge for the camera operator.
Yeah, God bless our tripod camera operator that on a Jeff Goki weekend.
That's right.
Know? So it was one of her first times running a volunteer named Destiny. She was running camera. And I was like, this is quite the training session.
Yeah,
so good luck.
That's right. Jeff Koch, good.
She took it in stride.
You get the secondhand workout.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Very
on
energetic guy, that man.
Yeah. Well, we're going to deep dive a little bit into our first message on the book of Ruth today. We started off on Sunday. I preached on Ruth chapter 1, a little bit of context for Ruth. So I brought us through, as we often do for those intro messages, right? It was a little bit of that intro to the commentary, which is, I feel like, is an analogy I use that's unhelpful unless you're a Bible nerd. But I guess if you're listening to a church's deep dive podcast, you are at risk for being a Bible nerd. But when you open up a commentary, right, there's usually, before you get to the commentary on the actual verses, there's usually a few paragraphs or a few pages of like context for the book.
What's funny is like intro to the commentary reminds me of like assistant to the regional manager, not assistant regional manager.
It's not the commentary, manager. It's intro to the regional
commentary. Yeah, and it's like how many
intro
layers
to
removed?
The scriptural commentary.
Yeah, it sounds super exhilarating to me. So
yeah. But what's fun for me, I feel like that is often so much of there's so much pay dirt in that, right? And we try to leave that in balance with the reality that, hey, the Bible is approachable. Like if you have the Bible in a language that you understand and can listen to or read, like you're able to get the Word of God in you in a life transformative way, and that's it. And if you are limited in your cognitive capacities, right? If you're mentally challenged and you're able to hear the Word of God, like that's good enough. Like you can get all the things that are of great value in the gospel can hit any human being.
Yeah.
And so you don't need to be a genius or a theologian or a student of culture and history to wrap your mind around that. At the same point, the Bible is like an endless cavern of goodness with chamber after chamber after chamber after chamber, and so I find for a lot of us who've been reading the Bible for a long time, there's often so much that gets illuminated when we try to track the context. And oftentimes we don't even need to leave the Bible to do that. Actually, a lot of the context that we offered on the book of Ruth is just connecting dots that are there in the scripture. Sometimes we're pulling in archaeological stuff and other texts that are not biblical texts, ancient texts and things like that. Commentaries, we're doing linguistic studies, that kind of stuff. But a lot of what we did in Ruth for that, setting the table for that, is right there in the Bible. I mean, the book of Ruth offers its context. It tells us first paragraph or first sentence, hey, during the time of the judges. Okay, great. Well, there's some context here. Here we are.
Right.
But yeah, so we offered some of that, and then we got into Ruth chapter 1, and in particular, really just got into what Ruth means. the Hebrew word picture for her name, and the reality that here we have a woman who's clinging to Naomi, and finding the strength to do that because she was clinging to God. And we went to some nerdy places. We went to the Hebrew word pictures, and you and I can talk about that a little bit, nerd out on that somewhat today. But at the end of the day, everything that I said in the message really is their low-hanging fruit if you're just reading it in the English, right? You can see my main point of the sermon was essentially, or I should say the tension that I was trying to help us grapple with is the reality that we're lonely and we need people and we need connection. And then the kind of the point getting to it is, well, if we cling to the Lord, that gives us strength to heal from pain that we've gone through, and gives us strength to offer that strength, that attachment of belonging to other people. And you can see that right there in the English, Ruth clinging to Naomi, making a covenant with Naomi and with God, there in that space. So yeah, that's a little flyover of the message. I know you just kind of recapped that.
Yeah. I was gone on vacation. I was enjoying 75-degree weather on 4th of July.
Where were you guys?
Santa Barbara,
Ooh.
which was my first time there, and especially in that northern coast of Southern California,
Yeah.
So it was definitely awesome.
Nice.
I wore a jacket on 4th of July.
What kind of?
And listened to the
some
waves.
Good fireworks.
Yeah, I mean they're kind of far away, so I was expecting them to be right there, but we were watching off of a coast that was looking at a harbor, so it was miles away, but you could see the harbor. So it was really fun. I mean, now that I have kids, everything is exciting because they get to experience something. So I was just looking at my kids watch the fireworks the entire time, because I'm one of those cynics that's fireworks,
I've seen those.
Yeah, and then you got the people that record the fireworks, and you're like, when are you ever gonna watch that back?
It's not gonna look cool on camera.
Yeah, but anyways, it was kind of a trip to hear the waves crashing on the shore at night on the beach, watching fireworks, wearing a jacket. 4th of July, it was crazy.
Yeah.
But that's what I was doing while you guys were here on Sunday.
Silas and I had a debate as to whether or not the Fire Nation was attacking.
Oh, yeah.
On the 4th of July.
Yeah. I'm familiar with Avatar: The Last Airbender, but I am not seasoned or knowledgeable.
You haven't? Have you watched enough to know that you're missing out?
Yes, my sister-in-law is she has a tattoo for all the elements on her leg. So she's a diehard fan.
Yeah.
And she keeps trying to get me to watch it, but I just can't do it. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know.
But you are into the Star Wars one, aren't you? The Clone Wars, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I've watched a lot of Clone Wars. I haven't finished it.
See, I'm the inverse. I've tried to get into that a few times. And I'm assuming it's one of those ones that has a great story arc.
It's exactly like Avatar.
To get to the story arc.
It's exactly like Avatar, and that this is completely unrelated to Ruth, but we're just
there's a story arc in Ruth. Yeah, there we go.
But yeah, it's like Avatar, where the creators were we're gonna set out and make a kids TV show, and then 2 seasons, and they're like, oh, kids really are not watching this. This is a young adults TV show, so let's get kind of more mature in the themes, not explicitly mature, but darker and heavier subjects. So Clone Wars is the exact same way.
Well, the Avatar guys, they actually set out to their stated purpose from the get-go of that was to kind of change the way kids' stories were told, and to say hey, let's tell a kid's story that's based in good story.
Yeah.
Which, man, that has nothing to do with the Book of Ruth, like you said. But here we go. You got us talking about cartoons.
Hey, this is conversational podcast.
Yeah, so don't recommend the theology of the Clone Wars or of Avatar: The Last Airbender. But as far as enjoying,
but you can see
story,
the biblical parallels.
That's right.
Because every story is just a biblical parallel.
That is very true.
There's a chosen one.
Yep.
They have there's
need
a fall,
for redemption.
Need for redemption. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Turns out nothing's new under the sun.
Yep.
So.
Very true.
But anyway,
I'm glad you enjoyed your 4th of July.
That's what I was doing while you guys were, in Phoenix burning your heads off.
Yeah. You probably didn't sweat at all while you were watching the fireworks, huh?
Not while I was watching the fireworks.
Yeah. That's never happened on the 4th of July here in Phoenix.
Wore a jacket.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And nobody in their right mind has ever worn a jacket on the 4th of July in Phoenix.
That's very true.
Yep. Unless they were
true. I'm thinking about going to Santa Barbara every 4th.
Yeah, that sounds nice.
It's that much of a change. So
yeah.
Anyways, I got to listen to your I did a quick listen through.
Yeah. That's my move too.
And I usually never listen to the sermons because I'm here.
Yeah.
And I get to hear them in person, but it was kind of cool to open my Spotify and like press play on the sermon. Yeah. Sounds funny, but it's like I never get to do that. You know, I'm never on the other side of it. So
that's true. That's how I feel when I'm out of town for podcasts or whatever.
Yep.
Oh, I get to watch our podcast.
Right.
Like, I wasn't on it. You know,
yeah,
I get to
exactly.
see what David and whoever else was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I learned from your sermon was that idea of like, you know, your land was like your most valuable asset.
Yeah.
And someone would come in and like kind of keep that if it were to be threatened, you know, and even gift back and stuff like that. I think there's so much beautiful parallel even in that, you know, like what we can do to advocate for one another, especially as a community of believers. Yeah. Like, I know it wasn't, you know, your main point, but it's like, that's really interesting.
That's why I offered that context, so all these things click.
Oh, no, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, just the story that I've heard, you know, 100 times, but, yeah, I enjoyed your sermon. I really liked it. So thanks, I was doing other things while I was listening to it. So there were times where I was dipping in and out of conscious, active listening. But
that is my even when I've been on Sunday, I'll often before podcast do a quick kind of double speed listen through beforehand because I'm like, I need to remember and say things and not just like. But on Sunday, I'm like, I want to receive what the Lord's doing and.
Right.
But here I'm like, I need to have something worth saying.
Right. Well, and like you tying it to your circumstances and even like, you know, Colleen being married into your family, kind of the hope of redemption in that. And it kind of played out a little differently. Yeah. It was like, because I know you really well now, that like definitely... Like, I'm sure that was really, there are moments where it was hard for you to pull some of that together to be able to share. And I really appreciated your honesty and vulnerability in that because, I mean, like, I think in the, like, Bible, we see a lot of really insane family dynamics and situations. And it's kind of hard to think, you know, like, incestual babies and stuff like that. And you wonder why people are like, the Bible's kind of weird. You're like, it's not that weird. It's kind of weird. It's pretty weird sometimes. but
also so is everybody's life.
Yeah. Yes. And that's what I'm saying.
That's what's so weird about it, right?
Yeah. And you've heard a little bit of my story growing up and stuff like that and what it was like, you know, with my family dynamic. So I don't know. It's just, I think everyone has, whether or not they've experienced it firsthand, like there's no perfect family situation, even if our outlook of others is kind of like that. So I don't know. I just appreciated the educational element of like just the cultural context in that time period. And then also your vulnerability to open up that story. Yeah.
That part was not in the original plan. I woke up Sunday morning and just felt like the Lord was saying,
oh, wow.
I had statistics in that spot in the intro, you know, and I just felt like the Lord was telling me like, hey, like you're preaching so people hear, not preaching so that it's taught.
Yeah.
And I felt like the Lord said, what in like, why is this important in your life?
Yeah.
This message. And I was like, well, obviously, you know, like here's this place I once belonged so well in my family and that's been so under attack and I'm trying to, it's been decimated and I'm holding on to what threads I can and actually rebuilding some things, you know? Yeah. But some areas it's just more like, well, we're just holding on to the thread. And maybe that thread turned into a yarn. And I'd say with my mom, it's actually fully, it's rebuilding and restoring in some incomplete, but good ways that I think will be robust in years to come. And it was probably less fractured with her than anybody else other than my dad. Between me and my dad, him and I never fractured at all. But yeah, I just felt like the Lord saying, well, this is like, this story is not unusual, which is so crazy because as I was going through it all, it really did feel like this is rare and unusual stuff that my family is unfortunately like the tip of the spear for. And that's what I have come to realize in the last few years is like, that's kind of what it was. My family was a bit in the tip of the spear and for some of the particular ways in which maybe the broad headlines of like family fracturing, none of that's new or unique, but some of the stuff around which my family fractured was unusual when it first started to happen. And then post-COVID, it was just like, oh, it's just...
This is a lot of people's stories.
Yeah, it's just a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, it's almost...
Which is so sad.
Yeah, it is. It's heartbreaking. I mean, I remember when some of the stuff was breaking into my family, going and finding the one person I knew who would have some tangential perspective on it. And now I find people coming and asking about, like, you know, that, and in particular, part of what I'm talking about is LGBT brokenness and things like that. You know, there's people coming all the time saying like, hey, like, what do I do? This is some of this and this ideology and the related ideologies and the like similar but not necessarily directly related to ideologies. Like they're smashing my family to bits, and I'm like, oh yeah, like this has become a normal part of life now. So let's, like, their good news is it's not an unknown like it was when it started happening in my family. But
yeah, the amount of people at or around my age that have gotten no contact with like a parent or something like that.
Yeah.
Like very consciously, you know. I don't want to say for menial reasons, because I think that's it can be disrespectful in that way. Like I don't want to minimize what people feel, but
they ought to be below your priorities. They ought to be lower in your priority than your covenant with your parents.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, you know, my personal outlook is like, I don't know if I would necessarily go no contact with my parent over this situation, but you know, like there have been, like we had kind of talked about in a previous podcast, a child of divorce, and there have been like some challenges that I've had to, you know, overcome. So, yeah, I definitely feel for those people, but it's all I'm trying to say is, yeah, it's a very common story, like with people at or around my age. And I don't want to be disrespectful and be like, it's trendy to cut your parents off, but like there's a lot of people at or around my age that are doing this. Yeah. And I'm like, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about why even really, or like, you know, other than the few instances that have been like right in front of me with people that I know literally in my life. But yeah, it's very much like maybe it's a product of, you know, this kind of over therapizing, you know, like therapy speak and normal conversation, which necessarily is not a bad thing, but like there's kind of a curated therapy culture like within our culture. I don't know how to describe that really. So there's my hack way of kind of saying it. But
I think you're right. It's not people saying, oh, this is the cool thing to do. Maybe in some rare scenarios with a 14-year-old, but even then I don't think so. But what it is we learn from what we see the people around us do. Right. You know, and sometimes what the majority of people around us are doing is incredibly unhealthy. Yeah. And in this situation, it's an unhealthy response to usually unhealthy things that were already unhealthy. Right. It's the two wrongs don't make a right situation. Yeah, exactly. It's a lack of understanding grace in the way relationships work.
It's taking justice into your own hands. Really.
Yeah. And it's also an oddly religious, and in the negative sense of the term, like religious, self-righteous, self-religious attempt at doing something that is devoid of the grace that we find in the gospel. And because it's essentially saying like, hey, you've broken rules and I got no grace for that. Right. And even if you track it a little bit, it'd be interesting to really deep study into this, but like, it seems like the enemy's tactic in our culture a few generations ago was like to shake the initiation of family, just to shake the origins of a family, right? So essentially, can we get mom and dad to not be married in the first place? Can we get mom and dad to divorce and to rip a family in half? Right. And that happened quite thoroughly for quite a long time and continues to happen. But more recently, it's been a wave of the enemy saying, can I break that fractured family into another piece? Right. Can I chip something else off? Yeah. And in a new way, because you didn't see that. You know, it was pretty common for even pretty dysfunctional families to essentially, you know, it was not uncommon to see husbands and wives turn their back on each other, but it's been pretty uncommon to see kids turn their back on their parents. Even in the back end of that. Not that, I mean, certainly to have tension, to have frustration, you know, but now it's just become par for the course where it's not happening for, and I should be more precise, right? Like once upon a time, divorce for extreme reasons. For the last few decades, divorce for any reason.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, not too long ago, separation from mom and dad for extreme reasons. Now, for much less extreme reasons, and pretty soon, and maybe already for some people, for any reason, if that makes sense. And really, what's happening is we've completely dissolved our interaction with covenant, and we've forgotten that there is covenant that is other than a marriage, you know.
Right.
And I think that was something maybe that didn't make it fully into my message that felt pretty important that I touched on a little bit. Right. The beauty of what Ruth is doing and engaging in this covenant with Naomi, it's a pretty powerful thing. And we really need to do some work to reclaim our understanding of covenant.
Yeah.
Obviously, because the one thing we actually call a covenant in our culture, marriage,
is a marriage. Yeah.
You know, we don't hold to that covenant very well. But in addition to that, I think there are a lot of relationships that we have in life that ought to be covenant, that we certainly don't treat as covenant, and we maybe even need to recognize and potentially even define as covenant. You know, there are relationships there are brothers that you have that are not related to you.
Right.
And you're in covenant with them. You may never have actually made a covenant with them.
Right.
But it's worth considering, who in my life am I, or at least ought to I be in covenant with? Ought I to be in covenant with?
Right.
And then treating that as such. And one element of that is to recognize that you don't turn your back on covenant relationship.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say define covenant. Like, obviously in a marriage, we understand it, right? But like, I'm not thinking covenant marriage with a brother.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So like, what is, I want to ask you that question. And also it kind of reminds me of like, sometimes when we want to define something, we look at like what it's not, you know, and which is helpful. But what's the old saying about like when they train bank tellers or cashiers, like to spot counterfeit money?
They look at the real thing.
You have to study the real thing so thoroughly that when something counterfeit comes to you, you can instantly identify it. So that kind of just reminds me of that, you know, not even just on the topic of covenant, but everything in the Christian life and apprenticeship to Jesus. It's like we should know what it looks like so well because we read his word, because we're engaged with the Spirit, that when something feels out of line, we know we have an accurate lens of like what is out of line or what is in line with kind of that idea. So,
well, covenant, I think, is a relational contract that's deeper than a piece of paper, right?
Yeah.
So again, marriage is the example that we still hold to, and that's why, gosh, man, I remember years ago I had a friend who ended up blowing up her marriage, and she had a coworker who was a big part of that. Right. And he was just telling her like, oh, what's the big deal? Like, the marriage you have is just a piece of paper. You know, and people say that, you know, and they think that, and it's like you have fully, and maybe in your materialist worldview, and not materialist like I like shopping, but in materialist, like all there is in the world is material.
Like if you got to define something without God, it isn't just a
scientism is your religion, like only what is observable is real.
I guess you could say pagan, because pagan is without God, right?
Or
kind
other
of
gods,
an idea,
you know?
or other God. So,
but in that world, yes, marriage is just a piece of contract. But guess what? That's not the reality,
right?
Because that piece of paper is only a component of something that is far deeper than that. And it is the covenant. It is a commitment that's mutual, that's actually has some life in it because it's relational. It's not a contract with your bank, that it's not the terms of your credit card,
right?
Where it's like, okay, if this, that, now I'm going to break. It's not a contract with your landlord,
right.
I'm going to break the lease, nobody says breaking the lease is anywhere near the same as, breaking the terms of your marriage.
Right.
And for good reason, because maybe breaking a lease isn't ideal, but I wouldn't say it's inherently sinful or wrong, and you're not violating someone. Yeah, exactly. You're going to spend the money, and your landlord's going to be made whole, inconvenienced, but made whole by it, by the amount of money that you're going to pay for that inconvenience. But a covenant is deeper than that. It is the definition of a commitment to a relationship. That often has a defined terms. And I think oftentimes what we have is covenant relationships for which we haven't fully made covenant. We haven't defined the terms, but they go unspoken. So if you think of your best friend, you probably ought to be in covenant relationship with your best friend, and you might even be. And maybe if you became best friends when you were young enough, you might have actually spoken that covenant.
Yeah,
you think of your kids doing that, right? Little spit pact. Or
hopefully it's just spit, not like a blood oath or something crazy.
You're not getting little 8-year-olds getting a little intense in there.
Yeah,
but you think of like the classic, boys club, in their treehouse, that is the core human thing.
The bro code.
Yeah, the bro code, right?
If you're my best friend, don't date my ex-girlfriends.
Yeah. There's a
huge violation.
There's a term. Yeah. And there's an actually somewhat spoken, unspoken term of that. Yeah. And really, like with your best friend, with the guy who's your brother, who's not your brother, you know what I mean? Like spoken or unspoken, you have an understanding. Yeah. I'm here for you. You're here for me. I got a best friend who hasn't been a big part of my life for years. And he knows and I know that even though we've had pretty minimal contact over the last almost decade or so, he needs me, I'm there. I need him, he's there.
Or you pick up where you left off.
Yeah, exactly. It picks up right there. And those were defined terms when we were younger. You know what I mean? From about like 8 or 9 all through into maybe like our early to mid 20s. Right. Like we were tight. And we still are, even though we're not intertwined as we once were. Right. And and so that, like, I will never turn my back on that covenant, nor will he. And even if life has pulled us somewhat apart, and even if we've drifted a little bit here and there, and that's a big deal. It's important to have those. It's important to show up. I would say ideally you're maintaining it even better than me and my best friend growing up have, where there's actually still some connection there. But it's worth saying, and this would be a whole other page of that message where a slightly different message would have been to say, like, who are the covenant relationships in your life? Who are the people with whom you ought to have a covenant? And consider whether you need to at least acknowledge the existence of that covenant. Right. If not even make that. Now, on the flip side, you shouldn't have a covenant with a guy at Trader Joe's. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Those peanut butter cups are pretty good. Yeah, that's true. They are pretty good. And you probably shouldn't consider most of your work relationships. Right. I work at a church. You guys are, we're actively working behind the scenes on staff to be more like an actual family here. And I wouldn't say I ought to have a covenant relationship with everybody who works here. Yeah, but with a few. No, for sure. But for me, like, I've met some of my best friends here. So, it's like, like those people that I think of. It's there. It's kind of right here. It is there. So, and so. Just funny kind of how that, I think it's a value at minimum to just consider, with whom do I have an unspoken covenant? Yeah. And acknowledge that, and then realize that God has modeled for us a life in which he never turns his back on covenant relationship, even when he could. I think one of the most beautiful maybe covenant relationships that don't immediately come to mind, but I feel like you've modeled so well, and I'm feeling like I'm walking out right now because of, one, I have 2 small kids, and then just my age, but like a covenant relationship with your dad is so, like, it's kind of obvious right there, but like, and maybe when you're married, you don't really think about it like that, again, because we understand covenant is literal marriage, but like
I feel like that is something that like the world would be a so much better place if everyone could maintain a really strong, like healthy, net positive, covenant relationship with their own father, you know.
Honor your father and mother that it may go well with you all the days of your life.
And mom too. But I feel like that's
your blood relationships are a covenant.
Yeah.
That you may or may not choose to pick up.
And maybe I'm saying that because I'm a male, so it's more self-identifying, like especially now that I have kids, I'm seeing my dad and me all over the place, you know. And that's a good thing. So, but if you're a female, maybe it is your mom or something like that. So
we've talked about this before, I think. I don't know if we've talked about it on camera or not, but like when you talk to Latinos in America, if a group of Latinos are in a room without very many white people, without very many Anglo culture people talking, and they decide to talk crap about the white people, probably the number one thing they're talking about is those people just put their parents in a home.
In a home, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I've heard that. That's like a meme in my culture.
Yeah. And what they're really saying is they are turning their back on a covenant with their parents. Mm-hmm. Now there's some nuances there, right? Like for example, my dad didn't want to be at home, did not want to be in our home, not because he didn't want to be with us, but he so very much was in the last years of his life. Yeah. His primary focus was not pulling away from our newborn kids. Right.
He didn't want to feel like a burden.
Where there I was actively trying to get him into. Right. And so that's a little bit of a difference. And so there are situations, and then of course there are times where it's like you're not capable of caring for them the way.
Well, to me that like.
So I'm not saying everybody who puts their parents in a home should feel like they've abandoned their covenant.
Right.
But that's what's being complained about when someone complains about it is that in general, like you have a responsibility, you have a covenant to your parents.
Yes.
That I don't know that you're holding up to.
Well, and if you have a covenant relationship, it's presumed mutual, right? Yeah. So like your dad not wanting to be a burden to you and your wife and your newborn is like, that's like his giving, like his gift, like within that covenant, him keeping you in mind, item,
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
And I think that is the important nuance to, because I don't want to speak for Latino culture because one, I don't know enough about it. You definitely do because you've spent a lot of time traveling the world and being with other cultures. But like I like using that kind of analogy. It's like, like you could definitely get into like, oh, I have a covenant to my parents. And now like especially if I have a wife, like biblically, I'm supposed to leave my mother or father and cleave to my wife, or my spouse. And it's like, if my mom and dad are still making my decisions for me and stuff like that, that would be like not an ideal covenant relationship to have. So looking at it the other way too.
Yeah, there's complexity in relationship for sure. And there's complexity in that. So of course your covenant with your spouse becomes secondary only to your covenant with the Lord.
Correct.
And then your kids are in the mix and your parents are in the mix, and I would say probably your kids are coming before your parents. Yeah. That's the right order of things, like we prioritize down in the kingdom of heaven, and that's how God has structured things. And we prioritize out from ourselves, right? Yep. So before myself, it's my parents. Before my parents, it's my kids. Before any of those people, it's my spouse, and before my spouse, it's the Lord, right?
Yep.
But I think that, it's just a value to recognize. And even when it's strained, right? So like my relationship with my siblings is very strained. And I don't consider myself, I could free myself of that covenant if I wanted to. I feel like enough has been said or done with at least one of them that, I don't think anybody would hold it against me to let that go. But I don't feel that freedom in the Lord to do that.
Right.
And I also don't feel the Lord calling me to not turning your back on covenant with someone doesn't mean just being a doormat. It doesn't mean just letting the relationship be, trying to force it to be what it's not, It doesn't mean not having boundaries. Right. It means a lot of things in a lot of situations. I'd say with me and my siblings, what the Lord has called me to do is to do everything I can to leave the door ajar. Yeah. And so I've tried to do that And I think when my dad passed away, it went from just like cracked to like enough room for a foot to get in there,
Yeah.
And
did you think that was going to happen?
When people pass, it's an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It was very difficult to not. It was probably the hardest time for me to not shut the door.
Yeah.
And I think it was only able to do so by the literal grace of Jesus.
Right.
But the result was, I think the door widened a little bit. And so that's, we don't talk on the phone all the time.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, we're not doing holidays together these days.
Right.
They're out of state, which makes that a little simpler, It meant when they were in state, it meant that I invited them every time and knew that they were going to say no.
Yeah.
And when they said, "Hey, we don't need you to send us Christmas presents," I said, "I'm going to send you Christmas presents. You don't need to send me presents if you don't want to."
I feel like a lot of people kind of on the cynicals or like the other side of that could be like, well, like maybe you want to do that because it like makes you feel really good, and like it's kind of like this selfish take, but I found like in those very rare, and it's not as prevalent, as your story, but like those times in my life, it's like, oh, it definitely would be easier. Like if I wanted to be fully selfish, I wouldn't like pat myself on the back when I would like do something that like I think is virtuous when it comes to this relationship that I feel like the Lord is telling me not to end.
Yeah.
It's like it actually kind of opens the door to make things a little more challenging and more like difficult, because like once that conversation is had, I'm not even speaking from your, story, obviously, like from kind of the things that I think about, it's like, oh, if there's a conversation that was cracked open about like, oh, this is going to get real, and like our differences are now right at each other, and rubbing against one another. It's like, that's not exactly like when I'm like feeling like, oh, like I'm so glad that I did that for myself. I'm trying to be the bigger person, It's often more challenging, and you have to start to articulate some really hard things that people, might not reciprocate. So
yeah. And I should say, in fairness, my parents or my siblings, they have not tried to fully shut the door on me and Colleen either. Maybe they've done the kind of things that I think maybe they were hoping would move us to shut the door, and again, since my dad's passed, there's been kind reaching out that actually has probably come from them more than it's come from me, them just saying like, oh, hey, it's Dad's birthday. It's Father's Day, reaching out and having some tenderness there. So that's cool. That's been good and sweet, and we'll see what the Lord does in years to come. But I think again, part of that is just saying, okay, here's covenant. And so there's a lot of genuine good reason to let go of that. But the Lord tends to bless when we don't. Yeah. Which isn't to say, and it's like, we always have to throw these caveats because I just never want to have someone hear the wrong thing, is not to say there's not a time and a place in which the right thing to do is to get a divorce or is to cut out. Right. But I would say that should never be done without fear and trembling, not of the other person, but of doing what's right and missing out on what the Lord might have. And it might mean coming at great cost for you to remain faithful to a covenant that someone else is not interested in maintaining.
I think that's important to keep in mind too, because of just stories that we hear in like the system of like the church can kind of like divorce is like even in circumstances where it's pretty obvious maybe a divorce should happen, like there are people within the church saying don't do it, like either because it looks bad or the kids need you two together or whatever, So I think it's like that kind of nuance that we're talking about.
And yet there's complicated situations, like I know there was a divorce, some people I was very close with, where the thought process was like, hey, husband had some things kind of in the past that weren't the worst things in the world, but weren't okay. And a non-physically abusive, forward trajectory struggle with anger, among those, but not not okay. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
not cool, you know, not hitting everybody, not constant, but like not cool, big problem, need to deal with that. And one of the factors in that divorce was like, hey, and this is like a common story, right? It's like, hey, like I want my kids to know that this isn't okay.
Right.
And I want them away from that. Well, the reality is, not in every situation. And there are some, you know, it's gosh, right? Like all the nuances. Please just assume all the nuances. Get counsel, seek the Lord, you know, get good counsel. If you're thinking about divorce, it may be the right thing. It may not be the right thing. It may be an acceptable thing, but the Lord has something better, you know?
Yeah.
So hear all that, but just thinking through one particular specific scenario, the context of which I have that, if you're listening, you don't have, right?
Yeah.
It was like, well, yeah, you choosing to divorce and one of your reasons being to communicate to your kids that this isn't okay and to get them away from that. Well, the net result was, guess what? Shared custody, and that's still their dad. And their dad is now no longer in relationship with someone who sees that as a problem. And you've lost your platform as a primary tool for healing that the Lord might want to use in their life. And now your kids are exposed to that in an environment where it's like, hey, that's okay. Like, this is fine. This is just how we react, you know, instead of an environment where there's someone saying, that's not okay. Like, you know what I mean? There's no, so it's actually and then on top of that, you put your kids in a life where what was meant to be stable became far more unstable. Mm-hmm. And they didn't get relief from that anger, and the anger wasn't resolved, you know, whereas before it was actually on a forward trajectory, you know? And so it's like it didn't solve it. It made it worse. No, I'm not saying that's not necessarily understandable. I'm not even necessarily saying it's not justifiable. I'm saying the net result is you got tricked into thinking that was going to solve, and it solved nothing. And again, one specific scenario, please don't assume that I'm reading that into yours, even if on paper your situation is exactly the same. My point is just saying, actually, in that scenario, I'm pretty sure that staying committed to a covenant that you had an out of would have resulted in something a lot better for you, for your ex-spouse, certainly for your kids. Yeah. Even though you thought you were doing a kindness. At the end of the day, one of our fundamental human needs is stability of relationship. Right. And if that's shaken in the family, that's shaken. Now, on the flip side, if you're the angry person in the house, you're breaking and shaking that stability in the home, and you're violating what your kids need. Yeah. So it's not it's not putting it all on the other person to stay by any stretch of the imagination. It's just saying a little bit, that solution might not be the solution that you think it is all the time.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's that mutual back and forth two-way street of what we understand covenant as, but so we spent a lot more time on that than I like. Yeah, Ruth than I thought. Like, we had a couple extra in the back pocket.
Yeah, we got some other things that we would have dug into, but
we did it.
Yeah. We
didn't have to mishmash.
Yeah, we were ready to pull out some digital discipline stuff, which is like
my time will come.
Dalton's jam. Yeah,
my time will come.
We'll do that soon, but so we got quite a bit more Ruth. Well, a bit more Ruth. It's a short book, but CJ coming up this week, and I'll be preaching on chapter 2.
Man, CJ is a lot better than I am at this. So next podcast is going to be very good.
Going to be easy peasy. CJ and I. Yeah. With some luck, if we can get him on here, we'll nerd out. Yeah. And if you're listening with us and you're thinking, hey, you guys have been missing a couple rounds. Yeah, sorry. We've missed a couple. Summer is a little more sparse around here.
Just gets weird, you know.
It's like a busy, not busy time. There's a few less people in the office. It's a bit trickier to nail down people for podcasts. And I know you guys are all on road trips and are wanting to hang out with us more, but
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do a weekly podcast, literally on the week, and not batch them. So I'm gonna give myself a little bit of an out.
Well, it's all my fault, but
it's not all your fault. Too, so. I'm the devil on your shoulder being like, you should cancel this week. We don't have to do one. But I love doing them. But yeah, it is a lot of work doing them weekly. It's a big commitment, but it's good work. So.
And it's enjoyable as well.
It's okay if we play hooky like a couple times.
A couple of times through the course of the year. I mean, it came a long way. We were doing them here and there.
Yeah.
And then at some point in time, 2 years ago, we decided.
I'm really, years ago, right? It's a feat of the human ability to like wrangle anyone here for a weekly commitment, for an hour. So we've done it. Special.
It's been good. And hopefully you guys, I mean, if you're still listening now, hopefully you find it valuable. Because you listen to Dalton and I talk about stuff for a good.
They turned it off when I started speaking.
Not at all, man. But anyway, thank you guys for hanging out with us. Deep diving into the Book of Ruth. We'll do some more of that. We really appreciate you guys. And if you found this valuable, you can do all the things the YouTubers and podcasters tell you to do. You can like, subscribe, follow.
I'd like to throw an extra one in there I think you could start implementing. On whatever you listen to on podcasts, rate that podcast.
Oh yeah.
On the platform. So if you're on the Spotify,
only if you're going to do a 4 or higher.
Yes. Yeah. It's,
don't give us no bad ratings.
Yeah. No bad ratings. What I was going to say is if you're listening on Spotify, hit that 5 stars. You can also comment on the Spotify episodes, which is kind of cool. If you're on Apple Podcast, definitely rate it.
And if you're at the end of the podcast and you got less than a 4-star in you, I don't know why you're still listening to us. Why didn't you? You're just hurting yourself.
You're hurting yourself at this point.
Anyway, thanks so much, Dalton. Thank you guys for hanging with us, and we will see you on Sunday.
Bye.